everybody, I am so excited for our second workshop. We are here to talk about when is the right time to pursue a graduate degree. I mean, you are all professionals in your careers. You are all potentially thinking about it or are already in a graduate degree, or maybe you're considering pursuing an additional graduate degree if you've already got one. This is an extremely pertinent and relevant topic for anybody who's thought about more education. This workshop is for you. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker this evening. It's going to be really insightful, very data-driven. It's going to have a lot of facts and figures that will hopefully help you make the most educated decision about what makes the most sense for you. By the way, my name is Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. And really, you've already started meeting with your mentor. That is awesome. Hopefully, you've already set up your first meeting. Maybe you've even already set up your second meeting. If that's the case, that's amazing news. But the focus for this workshop is how can you be intentional about really taking steps forward for yourself professionally. Now, I know that these workshops are on a wide array of topics. Obviously, our first workshop was on how to transition into a managerial role. This workshop's about determining whether or not it's worth it to pursue a graduate degree. But I really want to challenge you that when you're in your mentor meetings, that you are customizing it to your experience for what you want to accomplish with your own career. Because I recognize that some of these workshops are more relevant to you than others, and that's, by the way, completely okay. We bring in really amazing world-class guest speakers to come in and be our guests for these workshops, and that's fantastic. And the ideal goal is that all of them are relevant to you, but I recognize that it varies. And some workshops are going to be more relevant to some people than other people. But what I want you to recognize is that even in this workshop, even if you feel like it's not the most relevant to you, that there's a lot of nuggets. There's a lot of topics that we talk about with our guest speaker that I believe can apply to a lot of situations that you may face in your life. So I'm really excited to get started. Now, one thing that I really want to focus in on, and this is something we talked about last time in our workshop, and that is understanding your strategy, your story, and your state. Those are the three keys to being successful in this program. The most important one, that being state. So physically, where are you? What is going on in your world? Are you having a bad day? Are you having a stressful day? Are you having a difficult time with your significant other? Did your dog just die? I don't care what is going on with your world, no matter how stressful, no matter how mad, no matter how angry, no matter how bad anything is going on in your world, you can change your state in a matter of seconds because your emotions drive your emotions. So what I want you to do right now to get yourself ready for this workshop is I want you to stand up and I want you to shake it out. I want you to shimmy it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah! Just let it loose, let it out, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're letting blood flow to your brain. You're releasing endorphins in your brain. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for receiving information. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you sit down for too long, you have diminishing returns on your mental investment. Your likelihood of retaining that information is significantly minimized. So I want to challenge you to get up, shake it out, let it loose, get your blood flowing, because when your blood's flowing to your brain, your likelihood of actually remembering this information is significantly higher. Now, when you're going into your mentor relationship, when you're meeting with your mentor, if you can get your blood flowing before those mentor meetings, you're much more likely to retain the information your mentor has to say for you and to you. But if you don't get yourself into a state ready for this mentor relationship, your likelihood of making the most out of that experience diminishes. So I want you to get yourself into a state. Now, the next key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself? Why will you be successful? I'd love to know it. In fact, actually, if you could, post in the comment section, why are you going to be successful? I mean, if in your mind you think, hey, I'm cool with mediocre, I'm cool with just settling, this program is not for you. I can tell you that right now. If you're thinking to yourself, hey, I want to settle, I just want to kind of like not really aspire for too much, you wouldn't be in this mentor program. So what I'm here to tell you is shoot for the stars. Have big, crazy, hairy, audacious goals. And by the way, don't let anybody else judge you for your goal because your goals are your own. So what is audacious to you may not be audacious to somebody else. And what is audacious to somebody else may not be audacious to you, but that is okay. It's not for you to judge. It is for you to make strides for yourself. Because at the end of the day, this program is about personal growth and confidence, helping you put yourself into the best position for you to succeed. So if you can tell yourself a story for why you will be marginally to exemplary, significantly better than where you're at the beginning of this program, that is awesome, and that is where I want you to go. That's where I want you to be. Now, the last part is your strategy. What is the strategy that you're going to do to start putting yourself in the best position to succeed? Now, this program, this workshop specifically, is about when is the right time to pursue a graduate degree. Now, one thing that I strongly encourage you to do, because here's the thing, at the end of the day, your strategies are all about routines. We think about routines both in the bad sense as well as the good sense. Bad routines are, things that we consider habits, bad habits, they're bad. But we typically have a negative connotation around habits just because of so many bad habits we've heard about. But there's a lot of things and a lot of beneficial things with good habits. So what are things that you can do on a daily, regular basis that helps you prepare for anything that you want to be better at? That is what I want to focus on. So one strategy that you can implement is implementing a SWOT analysis on a monthly basis of your life, of your career, of your higher education experience, of anything. Doing a SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So if you're currently right now in a job and you're thinking to yourself, I'm contemplating a graduate degree, but I don't really know right now, what you'll want to think about is, what are the strengths of pursuing a graduate degree? What are the weaknesses of pursuing a graduate degree? What are the opportunities of staying in your current role? And what are the threats to leaving your current role for this graduate degree? If you can lay this out for yourself, it will help you on a substantial level towards making the most educated decision for yourself for why you should or should not pursue a graduate degree. Now, our guest speaker this evening is going to talk about the literal specific facts and figures of financially, when does it make sense for you to get a graduate degree, and when does it not make sense for you to get a graduate degree? And so I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say about this, because the insight is unbelievable. I think you're going to really enjoy it. But in terms of the strategies, I want you to do a SWOT analysis to help you prepare for that. The other thing is, I want you to start having more informational interviews beyond just your mentor. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what stage of life you are in. You can have conversations with people. Just because you're not a quote unquote current college student in a collegiate sense, you're still a student of life. You're still a student of professional outcomes. And by being willing to admit that you're still a student, you can take the knowledge of somebody else. You can say, hey, I'm a student. I'm interested in learning more about XYZ field. Would you be willing to have a coffee with me or a conversation with me? That is a great conversation starter for you to learn more about other fields, because at the end of the day, it's not about stagnating. It is about growing. It is about learning. It is about being uncomfortable and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So those are the key points I really want you to take away from our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to jump into our guest speaker. By the way, if you've not connected with me on LinkedIn yet, please do so. We have a LinkedIn community, a Ambition in Motion group where all of us participate in it. We can post our questions. Our entire community can answer them or see them or relate to them. It's a really cool place to be. If you don't have a LinkedIn, absolutely get a LinkedIn. If you do have a LinkedIn, you have not connected with me, I strongly encourage it. I'm so excited to get started, and I'm so excited for you to experience our guest speaker this evening. Thanks for your time. I'm looking forward to get this guest interview going.
Hey everybody, welcome to the interview portion of our workshop today. I'm so excited to dive into the topic, how to determine when is the right time to pursue additional education. So some of y'all might be thinking like, okay, I've got my bachelor's degree. I'm thinking about going to get maybe an MBA or a PhD or maybe some other form of master's degree. And you're trying to determine, gosh, will my employer maybe pay for it? Or, maybe should I go out and get it and see if my employer will give me a, promotion for doing so? Or, when is the right time to go about doing it? Will it make me more marketable in the workspace? Fortunately for you all, we've got a guest speaker with us here today. We've got Erick Rowe. He is one part of our executive mastermind group, but two, he's got some great insight as to what it means to get additional education. When is the right time to pursue this sort of stuff? And just ultimately things that you should be thinking about as it pertains to this topic. Erick, thanks for being on our workshop today.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a topic I love to chat about and often mentor others about. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it.
Absolutely. And just for our audience sake, do you mind just giving our audience a little high level overview of like what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Erick Rowe. I live in Austin here. Work for a company called Infor, leading product management for a product called Infor Nexus. We're a B2B supply chain product. I would lead the product management organization. It's about 70 people in the product management organization for Infor. Previous to that, and I can certainly kind of link part of this conversation to that, because I think it kind of can vary by company as far as when to go back for education. But I spent time at Oracle, and then previous to that at Target, and also National Car Rental and Northwest Airlines. But different companies have different culture, quite frankly, around going back for education.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit of your story in terms of, when did you get additional education? Why did you pursue that sort of educational path? Did it unlock anything for you? Did you hope it would unlock things for you? Like, I love to be able just to help the students watching today just decipher what's real and what's myth, because sometimes I've seen scenarios where we'll have some people that will go get their MBA, not tell their employer about it, get their MBA, and they're like, huzzah, I got it. And they go to their boss and like, ta-da, here's my MBA, where's my promotion? And they're like, dude, you never told me any of this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I had no idea you were getting your MBA on nights and weekends. I mean, congratulations, it's great, but I don't have a promotion for you. That's not how this works. You got to tell me what's going on. So I love to learn, what was your path to going to getting your additional education? Why'd you pursue that route? Just a little context. Tell me more.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is I had an undergraduate degree in business from a liberal arts school, and I've always really, really liked business. Since I kind of knew I wanted an MBA, just honestly for the content, kind of, read Fortune since I was a young kid almost, and just real passionate about it. And so I knew I always wanted it to. But what was interesting for a business degree, they often recommend don't go straight from your undergraduate degree. Spend some time working, get some real world experience, and then get your MBA. So I took that approach, got a job, traditional entry level job, kind of was managing a call center. And at that point, I went ahead and applied. And I applied for two different things. One was full-time, and then kind of had a backup. I lived in Minneapolis at the time to go to the University of Minnesota. And at that time, the University of Minnesota was like in the top 10 for part-time programs. And so, and they were also high for IT, which is what I was interested in. And so ended up, and maybe that would be some advice. I did pretty good on the GMAT score, but my work experience wasn't quite as good. I was not an investment banker. I was leading a call center, which I thought I learned a lot, but ended up applying to just the top, 3 of the top 5 schools in the country at that point, and got like on a wait list on one, didn't get into the other 2. And then I got into the University of Minnesota. And I kind of make a decision. Did I want to wait one more year, maybe expand a little bit more to the schools, take advantage of additional work experience I had, or did I want to go part-time? So there's no doubt everybody really kind of you have to look at your own life, So wanted to have kids, kind of wanted to settle down, buy a house, all those sorts of things. And
In
so
that scenario, was full-time MBA an option, or was it only the part-time MBA?
So that was one cool thing about the University of Minnesota. I don't know if a lot of schools do this, but one reason I think they were highly rated is the day program and the evening program were identical. And so what that meant is you could switch back and forth. And so I started off in the evening program. And at that point, I'd moved up to a little bit better job. I was doing revenue management, which is essentially pricing and inventory management. And quite frankly, probably what got me into more of a top ranked school. And I was going in the evening, and my view is, you know what, at any point, if I'm not loving my job, I can actually quit my job, take 4 classes instead of I was taking 1 or 2 in the evening, and then kind of go out and, essentially, almost double my salary, at that point. And so
Hold on a second. That's interesting. How did you determine you would be able to double your salary?
So that was 25 years ago, or at least 20 years ago. So it was a while ago. But, just kind of, I had an entry level job, and, MBAs were making quite a bit more. And so I'm sure quite a few people, if you just got your undergraduate degree, and then you look at what you'll get for an MBA, it is, it's definitely significantly more. But then you have to put it all together. Do you want to take on more debt? Wanted to buy a house, all these sorts of things. And so that's the reason, just mathematically and life-wise, it didn't make sense for me just to quit my job, go to school full time, and then, go out and look for another job. Because you don't know if you'll find another job. You don't know, do you want to put your life on hold, for a couple of years? So for me, the part-time program worked pretty good, always knowing that I could just go full-time and finish up if I wanted to.
Okay, that's awesome. And also interesting. I'd be curious because you mentioned you applied for like, some of the top 5 schools and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. From a financial perspective, I've always been fascinated by this. How do you determine which one's the right fit for you? Like, there's a wide margin between some of the more cost-effective MBA programs and some of the most expensive MBA programs. And I mean, personally, just what is for someone who's never pursued an MBA, what is the difference and why would it make any sense to pay 10, maybe even 20x for one MBA versus another MBA? Like what kind of
And that's a really good question. And I bet you anybody you talk to is going to be a little bit biased. I remember someone once telling me it's so hard to get into the top programs. They might, I don't know what the exact odds, but it might be 1 to 100, that you have for number of candidates you're competing with. And someone put it to me this way, said, if you get into, say, one of those top, we'll say top 5, maybe top 10 programs, true, you're going to get the networking. True, you're going to get some great professors and learn a bunch of stuff. But also, as an employer, they know you've already jumped through a bunch of hoops to get in. So, the actual getting into the program is essentially sends a signal that you're a certain caliber, and their risk is going to be quite a bit less than not. So that's one reason. There's no doubt if you go to one of those top programs, you are going to you're going to meet a lot of lifelong friends, and they're also going to be a pretty high caliber, which plays out. And of course, the education itself is pretty good. I personally, I remember because it was really tough, especially being on a waiting list. Wait one more year, and at that point, I think the University of Minnesota was, in the top 20. So it was certainly a good program, but not, kind of a crazy. And there's a little rationalization here, but I remember saying to myself, I'm going to learn close to as much. And do I want to be working for a company that's so elitist, that what school I went to is going to make a difference for being successful versus what skills I bring to the table. And like I said, there might have been a tad of rationalization there, but it did serve me well, to be honest, because I think I've done just fine. In the end of the day, it comes down to results, right? So if you go to an elite program, but it's not the right time in your life, for all the things that are kind of going against you, or you go to, say a top 20 program, but you're all in, you're completely engaged, you're really learning. And it's kind of, each school kind of has its specialties, and the specialties really kind of align up with what you're interested in, and as well as where you want to go. I would argue you're probably going to get more skills that you can apply, somewhere else. And at the end of the day, the world is pretty result orientated. You're going to be able to provide better results. I'm not 100% against it, but I do think when you take that next step down to something that's not in the top 20, we can say top 25, you're taking a little bit more risk because it is a lot of money that you're paying, even if it's 5% of the more expensive programs, and it's a lot of time. And I think sometimes, if it's a school that no one's ever heard of, it can, and I wouldn't say it hurts you, but you don't get quite the bump, because someone would be like, wow, why didn't they, if you live in Austin, but you don't go to UT, you may get some questions on that. And I'd weight that pretty heavily to try to go to a top 20, 25 school.
That's a really good insight, and I think that's a really good point. You know what, I never even thought about it as like for the risk reward factor. Like, I think there's some people who look at it as like, hey, an MBA is an MBA. It's the same 3 letters at the end of your name, but an MBA from like Harvard might be a little bit different from an MBA from a lesser known, smaller school that not many people have heard of. Obviously, from a financial perspective, it's probably a vastly different expenditure. But you bring up a great point of like the risk reward is like, how is this perceived in the eyes of an employer? Of when they're looking at your resume, what do they think about this when they see that?
Yeah, it definitely gives you a boost. And an elite degree, we'll just call them elite, going to give you the biggest, unknown school the next. And then One step below that, it's still not bad. I've talked to some people, and what it tells me is they have an affinity towards business, and they have an affinity towards continued education, which I think obviously goes hard. So I will absolutely take into consideration, even if it isn't a grade school, but it does impact you a little bit. For example, I met someone the other day, or actually it was a peer, and he mentioned that he was a Stanford MBA, and I didn't know that. And I hate to say that it elevated my view of him, but in some way it kind of did. So there's a little bit of a halo effect. But at the end of the day, the results that you provide are way more. I can also say now, working for 15 years or whatever, kind of post MBA, I've also worked with some people from, top 3 schools that, are not rock stars. And the ability to deliver and be successful at your job, it is 1,000 times more important. So kind of, as I guess it's probably like they say, it'll open doors for you, but once you kind of get in, you got to do it yourself, and you have to prove yourself, etc. And there's other ways to get in the door. So if you doesn't work out, because of the point you are in your life, or you have just an amazing job and you don't want to walk away from it for 2 years, and there's not a good, evening program, etc. There's other ways to open the door. So it's not something you have to do.
I'd be curious, would you ever advocate for someone to get a second MBA? I know it sounds silly to ask that question, but like, let's say I'm in a point in my life where financially I don't have a crazy strong situation. Maybe I got a bunch of kids and I'm just like, I'd love to get an MBA, but I can only afford to go to a smaller, maybe lesser known school that's only got online options, and is like the most affordable option I can pursue. But maybe, all of a sudden later in my life, my career takes a bump. I'm making more money. I've got a lot more time freedom. And I say, you know what, gosh, I could go and get another MBA and, apply for a Harvard or a Stanford or something like that. Would you advocate for something like that? Or is it like, once you have your MBA, you have your MBA, just kind of like...
Yeah, I think once you have your MBA itself, you almost would look bad to a certain extent. But what you can do, which gives you the exact same thing, and you can follow the same passion, is you could get, say, for example, a master's of analytics in business, from Kellogg. There's all these other master's degrees that you can take exactly the same thing. So if you have a tax interest, or you have an AI interest, or almost get a little bit more specialized around that business degree, and then it's going to look perfect sitting right next to it, versus, you got 2 MBAs, it seems
That is a great point.
A little off.
That's a really, I want to take a moment to ask the students watching this video right now a question. Post in the comments section. But I'd just be curious to know, if you were to pursue additional education, what would that be at this given moment in time in your life? So maybe you've already got your MBA, maybe even got your PhD, I don't know. But post in the comments section, if you were to pursue additional education, if you could just wave a magic wand, what would that be? Post in the comments section. I'd love to learn. So I would love to, Erick, just dive deeper into the decision-making process and criteria around that timing of it. I guess, have you ever considered going to an employer to ask to see if they would be willing to pay for your education?
Yeah, so in my particular case, what happened was, well, let me give a name to it. I was at National Car Rental. I was doing this yield management, and then had an opportunity to go to Northwest Airlines, where airlines do yield management even at a higher level. So did that. I was probably halfway through the program, just continued to go part-time. Both places had tuition reimbursement. Often what they'll do is, I think almost not everybody, but a large percentage have some sort of tuition reimbursement, where you maybe take one class, at a time, or $5,000 to $10,000 a year, which is a nice bump. And so I was doing that at Northwest Airlines, and was really interesting, is doing really good work. And kind of to your point, what do you do once you have the degree? And I think a lot of times, and probably almost always, if you get the degree and you're going part-time, um, you may have to go to get another job to get a significant bump. And that was at the point I went to Target. But it was really interesting because they really liked me at Northwest Airlines at that time. And my boss, went to the CIO as part of the IT group, and he's like, "Love Eric, let's get him some money." And this is what they said, but tell him it's not for his MBA because we don't want to have an MBA stipend. And the point being is he didn't feel from a process standpoint. And it's kind of like teaching, right? I think a lot of us know people that are teachers. You go out and you get your graduate degree, and then automatically you get more pay. And I think a lot of times businesses, at least that particular one, don't want to do that. So I think more times than not, you kind of can say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. This is being successful." They may give you a bump. It was like a 20% bump or something. It was significant, but once again, I could almost, I got another 50% by leaving, just kind of because of where I had come in the market and everything.
That's a really fascinating story and a really good point of just advocating for yourself. Because I'm personally running this through my own mind, like from a business perspective. Once you're big enough, you're like, okay, cool. Do I want to create an MBA or an additional education reimbursement program? And maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe there are some employees that I'd be happy to reimburse their tuition because I think they're really rising stars in my organization. And then there's some people that, they're not doing good work. They're not that seem to be that engaged in the work. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I'm going off to get my MBA." It's like, I don't see you being here long term. And if you are here long term, I don't think you're that good of an employee to begin with. Like, you're fine. You're getting the work done, but enough for me to put, I don't know, 50 to 100K out, whatever it may be for you to get your MBA. I don't know if that's something I'm wanting to be investing in. So that's a really interesting insight that you had there. Eric, I'd be curious to know, what would you say? Yeah, I guess that was an interesting point about just like advocating for yourself and making sure that people follow that. I guess, would you say that there were ever doors that opened up for you because of your additional education?
Yeah, you know what? They have. And or maybe it made it a little easier. So I went to Target, and I guess, the fact that I had an MBA definitely helped. So I might not have gotten that job, but you know what? They had a ton of, it was a business analyst. They had a ton of business analysts that didn't. So I probably would have, I think at that case, probably got paid more than if I had not. But then what's interesting is that when my first job in product management at Oracle Retail, the head of strategy had a MBA from Harvard. And I do remember him saying, and basically one of the challenges with product management is you need all kinds of different skills, but a lot of times the orgs are kind of made up with people that are really good. They've been there 20 years and they kind of know all the feature functions. And so they're looking for someone that kind of has a little bit more business acumen. And so, he saw that and it's like, okay, this guy has an affinity towards business. And that in itself was almost worth as much as having the MBA. I don't know if you thought I was going to take some ROI analysis that I learned in a class as much as, hey, this is a guy that likes business and, went out and got that. This is the kind of person I want on one of my team. So I think it did. There's a chance I would have got the job anyway, but it absolutely helped.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so that's interesting. So I think like a lot of people, I would imagine, are watching this right now and they're thinking to themselves like, okay, oh my gosh, like, do I have to be in a top 20 program? What if I already have my MBA? Like, what if I'm trying to do all these other things? Oh, geez, like, gosh, will this really put me in a negative spot with an interviewer for that? And it sounds like your capabilities is really what's going to speak for itself and are going to really help you out in the interview process.
100%. And it's just, yeah, once again, the MBA just shows you have an affinity towards it. You like it. The other one too, which I can't stress enough, is it's all about continuous learning. So, when we were chatting before, one of your questions was kind of what point do you need to do something? And maybe the most important lesson I would tell anybody is you just don't stop learning, right? So once you get out, maybe take a little bit of a break, but you just gotta, you want to keep on reading books. You want to keep on reading blogs. And the thing is, the world's changing so fast that, for example, generative AI, you probably didn't have any classes on anything that related at all to it, right? But you want to make sure you understand kind of the underlying principles of it. You don't have to be able to code, but you want to, have read a couple books about it, so that you're constantly learning. And everyone learns different. It can be podcasts, it can be networking, it can be reading books. But you just don't want to back off that in any way, shape, or form. And then it'll come through in interviews, because you'll be able to state something that's somewhat current, or people can just tell if you're continually accelerating your learning, and versus, hey, I went to school, I checked the box, I got my bachelor's degree, I'm ready now for a job. It's not really how it's played.
How do you maintain that discipline? I think that's something that a lot of students, I don't know. I think a lot of even professionals, I think there's a lot of people out in this world that are like, yeah, no, I love the idea, continuous learning, that makes tons of sense, but life happens. It's like, you've got kids, you've got these responsibilities, you've got this, you've got that, all these other things that are like pulling at you are make it easy for you to not develop healthy habits like regular reading or regularly learning some new things or pursuing certifications. Like, what do you do to maintain discipline in this area?
Yeah, and one thing, especially since we're talking to people just getting out of undergrad, is definitely give yourself license, because you're gonna, it's a 50-year marathon, right? And there's gonna be periods in your life where you have babies that are way more important. You put more time and energy into that than going back to school, or reading till you're completely exhausted. That said, what I think the secret is just stay curious, fall in love with learning, and make sure it's enjoyable. I do remember when I got my degree, and especially part-time, it was actually fun. I remember telling people, if you go part-time, what basically happens is you have one class, it'll be 4 hours a night, and then you're gonna have about 4 hours worth of homework. So if you think about that, that's one night a week after work. You don't get home until 10 o'clock at night, and then half of your Saturday's gone. If you want to do 2 classes, then double that. Your whole Saturday's gone, and you just have a Sunday. So by that, I was lucky enough that I actually absolutely enjoyed the lecture, because you're just sitting there, you're not doing anything. But if you're listening to a topic, right, that's kind of fun. So it's almost like watching a good TV show. You have 4 hours of writing a paper or whatever. That was not as much fun on the weekend, but that was really kind of the cost. And so, to me, it's finding something you really enjoy. I can say, it was a little bit of, it's 3 years of, no Saturdays, or half of a Saturday, but I truly enjoyed it. So if I was going, to get a graduate degree, kind of going back to school, find something you like. And don't do it just because you have to check the box. And there's so many different programs out there. If you want to go into business, but you have a nuance towards this, find a program that kind of has that nuance. It's going to be more enjoyable. And then the other one is keeping it fresh is look for different things that work for you. So for example, for me, especially when I had children, is really, I think I went 5 years and didn't read a single book. But what I did do is I listened to podcasts, and I listened to audiobooks. And so because you're commuting, you're driving the kids places, you're mowing the lawn, you're just chilling, and you do that, and the next thing you know, over a year, you've read 10 books, right, that you just listened to, and you really haven't sacrificed anything. But you got to be curious. You got to want to do it. If you don't want to do it, it's not going to be any fun. So do things you really enjoy, and then you're going to want to do it, and try to have the strings that kind of tie it back to work. Find authors you like, find podcasts you like, all those sorts of things. And it's the only way to do it. And then and life's honestly, it's not fun. There's way better things you can do with your life.
That's a great point. So there's a couple of things that I want to touch in on. One is, I can't remember who did the study, but I learned that if you want to retain something, teach it. So like as you're learning it, as you're learning in an audio book or a podcast or reading the book or going to your MBA program, like I'm a huge fan of like whatever I'm learning, teaching it to someone else, whether it be my wife or a friend or whomever. And it's not because like I'm trying to be this elitist dude who's trying to teach people things. It's really, I want to retain it. And my thought is if I can rationalize it in my brain to a point that I can make a compelling argument or a compelling point for why it makes sense, it's going to be much more likely to stick in my head than if I just consumed it and didn't actually react to it. And so I think there's some power in doing that. There's also, when it comes to, getting additional education, we had one of these interviews in a previous year. We had, our guest share that, your MBA or your graduate degree should equate to, it should be like a 1-to-1 ratio of like what your salary is coming out of that MBA or whatever that program. I can't remember. It was like 0.75 or 1, but it should be like it should never exceed whatever your salary is coming out, because if it does, you're going to be in debt for a very long time and it's going to be just a giant pain in the butt. Like I think she said like your goal is to have your graduate degree paid off within like 5 years after like completing it. And if you conserve and save or whatever based on whatever your profession is after you get that, whether it be MBA or master's in analytics or whatever it may be, you're much more likely to not put yourself in a financial hole.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And the other thing you mentioned earlier, Garrett, which I did not say, is it always comes down to habits too. I think all through the different stages. So don't beat yourself up if it's just not the right time to be doing something when it comes to continued education. But on the other hand, really look for habits. So if you kind of like audiobooks, okay, every time I hop in the car, I turn it on, or habits that you enjoy, of course. But once you do that, I heard a really, really good line, which was essentially habits compound, which I thought was just genius. So the same way that saving money for everybody is, you're ready to get out of college, roll up your 401k, because they'll have huge, huge wins. And you'll hear the examples where someone from 21 to 31 will save more than 31 to 65, right? If you haven't heard those stats, and it's because it compounds. It's the same way with habits. So if you can do these kind of small things, maybe take a little bit of a break after graduating, but then add some good continuous learning habits into your life. And come 30 years, you'll just be, amazed at what a better spot you'll be in.
Man, what a great insight on the 21 to 34 and the power of compounding. I'd love to ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comments section. What is a positive habit that you possess that keeps you whether it keeps you constantly learning or keeps you constantly growing? What is a positive habit that you possess as it pertains to your continuous learning? And if you don't have that, what would you like it to be? Post in the chat section, comment section. I'd love to learn about it. Eric, one final thing I want to touch on here is just this notion of putting ourselves, overcoming the fear of missing out, or the fear of thinking like I'm not enough by not having this degree. How did you, I guess maybe another way of putting it is, are you considering any additional education for yourself, even as you move through your career?
That's a good question. Kind of. I think that's the key, is you just want it. So for example, on LinkedIn, I'm in product management, and I'll see these Kellogg, ads pop up, and it's like, they'll have all the classes. You're going to learn this, you're going to learn this, you're going to learn this. I'm like, oh man, I would love to do it. Even though it might not have that huge return, I'd love to sit for, once again, 4 hours a week for 13 weeks, and learn the best approach towards pricing. Wouldn't that be freaking cool? And so, so the question is, yeah, always you want to kind of think about that. There does get to be a trade-off, as you get older. It may not be quite as smart as when you're younger. So that's one thought.
Wait, what? Say that again. You think as you get older?
As you get a little older. So let's say if I was to get a master's of product management, might be only working 15 more years versus, someone working 30 years. As you get a little older, the reasons not to. But you asked, kind of about self-worth. And I think this generation's a lot luckier from that, in that you start to see a lot of people that don't even go to college because there's so many opportunities to learn, right? And, with the internet, and all of the courses out there and the videos and the, different online learning, you can really, really, educate yourself at an amazing level. And I'll just even say this from a humility standpoint. Sounds like this group is, going to be freshly minted, bachelors. I don't even for a second think that the guy next to you that does not have a 4-year degree isn't going to surpass you, right? Because if they have that drive and they want to learn, there is so much stuff on the internet. They're absolutely going to learn to get there. So from that same perspective, the key is to keep learning, keep reading books, taking online classes, all sorts of things. So don't ever second rate yourself because you didn't get the degree. There's multiple paths to being successful. But for me, I absolutely enjoyed it.
That's cool. I love that point of, hey, it's not about your degree per se. It's about your continuous zest for learning. And I think it's easy for people just to get caught up in bad habits where, they're hitting the endless scroll on social media. They're just participating in activities that are not conducive to their own professional and personal development for that matter. And they think, oh, well, I've got this MBA from, Yale. I should be able just to, be able to subsist on this MBA for the rest of my life. But in reality, it's like, if you've got someone who's hungry, that's willing to outwork you, you're going to get passed up. And
outlearn you, right? Because there's so many different ways to learn now that there wasn't. I mean, the world-class information that we can, get from the internet right now is just, it's
what do you think about things like Udemy or Khan Academy or those sort of like?
I think they're really good. It's just amazing. So I definitely have my team use it a lot, and I'll personally find a bunch of stuff. Give you an example too about continuous learning is I don't know if we have any business people here, so we've been talking a lot about MBA, but a podcast someone recommended to me a couple of weeks ago is called Acquired, and it's amazing. Have you listened to that one, Garrett?
No, I have not. I got to check it out.
What it is it's a guy from Planet Money and NPR, and what they do is they do about a 3-hour history of all these companies. And then if it's really big, they'll spend longer. So they did about half of Microsoft in 3 hours. But it's amazing. They'll tell a 3-hour history of Nike, a 3-hour history of LVMH. And you get all these perspectives on business. And maybe that's kind of the point I'm trying to get across. I just heard about that a couple of weeks ago. Been listening to a ton of those podcasts. I probably recommended it to 5 people I know that I know also love to educate. And you just up your game. You get all these different stories, and you just have to you have to keep that, but you have to enjoy it. If you don't, enjoy it, then you don't want to do it. So you kind of want to find areas that, kind of align with your career, but also what you're kind of passionate about. And maybe, someone like what I do, you could be, maybe it's a technology angle that you really love. And then you listen to all this engineering, sorts of things. So find what you're passionate about and really, run with it. And good things will happen, and you'll be more self-fulfilled, and you won't be doing all the death scrolling that you're talking about.
I think I think podcasts can be so amazing for that. So last question for students, post in the comment section, what's a podcast that you're currently listening to or that you'd like to begin listening to help you with developing yourself professionally? I think that Acquired podcast sounds awesome. I got to check into that because I love books like Creativity Inc., which is by Ed Catmull, the guy who started Pixar. Incredible book. I love that. I love Shoe Dog, great book from Phil Knight on how Nike got started. I think those Genesis stories around how businesses get started and like where they were, what they learned from their mistakes, it's so interesting, especially like Creativity Inc. Like if you're a student out there watching this and you haven't read it, couldn't encourage, like, it's a really good book. And Eric, you're shaking your head. I'm assuming you have read it.
Yeah, I love that one. Yep,
It's
absolutely.
excellent. I mean, just like the whole story about building operational processes so they have their first hit. It's Toy Story, like knocks it off the chart, and then they're in between Toy Story 2 and A Bug's Life, and they took their A team from Toy Story 1 and put it on A Bug's Life, and then they brought in a whole new crew of people to do Toy Story 2, but they didn't have their like processes and procedures in place, and they literally scrapped the entire movie. They had to start it over from scratch again and have like, regular meetings that just check in. And then once they got the second version up and running, somebody actually had like access to the nuclear launch codes and like deleted all the files. And fortunately, this was an early time period in the 90s where Pixar fortunately had the forward thought to allow one of their pregnant colleagues to work from home. She had all the drives on her local machine that they like. It was like picking up a precious gem that like it was like if you watch it's like a dragon's egg that they're bringing back to the office. They're like, oh my gosh, it's alive, like all of our work for the last 3 years is not gone.
It's so true. And there's so many good stories around culture and everything. And, you just got to be exposed. You got to be exposed to as much as possible. You want to be curious. The other one too, and you mentioned this uh, call, Garrett, that kind of ran through my mind is I do remember someone telling me that undergrad and grad school is completely different. And I think that's important for the group to know. And what's completely different is, generally speaking, you end up in classes that you're super passionate about. So when you're getting your undergrad, there is a little bit of a check the box. You're taking an English class, a psych class, and then they're all great. But if you pick the right graduate program, it's like you're looking through the syllabus and you're like, oh, sweet, and can't wait to go delve deep on this one and this one. And it's very different than undergrad. So if you kind of feel a little burnt out from school right now, don't think, you know what, I'm kind of done and I'll never want to go to graduate school. Give it a little bit of time, and you'd be surprised. It's a very different experience on so many fronts.
I love it. Well, Eric, this has been a great workshop. Thank you for your insight and wisdom here. Are there any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our students before we hop off this workshop?
No, just that, well, I will. I'm jealous of everyone on the call because I do think it's great the world you're stepping into. Everything is moving so fast and changing so quickly. Great opportunities to learn, and best of luck to you all.
Amazing. Eric, thank you for being here. Students and everybody watching, thanks for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.